Gentlemen, you need to pay attention to this whiskey channel.
So the question we're going to answer today is, what's the difference between a smoky whiskey, a peated whiskey, and a non-smoky whiskey? Three major types of whiskey. Hi guys, welcome back to this segment of the Cape Breton Whiskey Bandit. Tonight I'm signing in from our secluded hideout here on Cape Breton Island on Canada's east coast. Don't bother trying to figure out where we're at. This place is heavily guarded and well hid. I've got a lot of whiskey to protect. Now tonight we're going to talk about malting. Malting is in reference to the process that we put barley through in order to make single malt whiskey. So what does the actual term malt mean? In order to make any malted whiskey, the grain that's required is barley. And so barley is the grain used to create malt whiskey and is actually required by law in Scotland and Canada to be 100% of the grain used in the process. Now in the United States there's a little bit of a difference. It doesn't by law have to be 100%, but normally the distilleries in the US use 100%. So that's the requirement for whiskey to be a malt whiskey. So the process of malting is when we take the barley, and I have some of the barley here, and we soak it for usually 2 to 3 days in water, allowing it to germinate. So germination, the seeds soften up and they crack, and what happens is the process actually releases enzymes that converts unfermentable starches in this grain to a fermentable sugars. And sugar is the key ingredient to make alcohol. So at the precise time, the germination is halted by our master distiller, and it's taken out of the water and then it's heated with dry air to dry it before the next step in the process. Now with peated malts, some level of smoke from what was always historically the way of drying whiskey was using peat fires in Scotland, but some level of smoke from a peat fire is introduced, and that smoke flavor is imparted into the barley, much as when you use real briquettes on a barbecue versus using a gas-fired barbecue. And the levels of smoke are measured in parts per million of what's called phenols. Now a heavily peated whiskey may have levels as high as 70 or 75 parts per million, something like a heavily smoked Islay, whereas a lightly peated whiskey, such as this Glendu from Glenora Distillery here in Cape Breton, maybe it's as low as 20 parts per million. And a really more subtle malt may be as low as 2 or 3 parts per million. And then there's malt whiskey that has no smoky flavor at all. And most of Glenora Distilleries whiskey is made with malt dried with only dry air and has no peat flavor added at all, but it has very exclusive flavors that are the world-class multiple award winners. So the flavors come from not only just the malted barley, but from the crystal clear mountain waters that flow down through the distillery from the Mabou Highlands in this case. And then it's aged in once used oak bourbon barrels with nothing more added. Now that's the case here at Glenora Distillery. In Scotland sometimes they may add some additional flavors, but the key is malted liquor, this is how it's created. There's a lot to learn, a lot of stuff to cover. We'll cover more steps in the whiskey making process in another clip. Come back for a little bit more education from me, the Whiskey Bandit. Meanwhile, I'm off. I've got some more banditry that I have to take care of this evening down in this area. And some of that banditry involves having a little bit of fiddler's choice. And on that note,
Stay in touch with the Whiskey Bandit. Like, share, and most importantly, subscribe. Join the clan.